They were a power couple before the name became popular, and a lot of it was because of two other women. I'm the NYC Traveler, and we're in Hyde Park, New York. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was born in Springwood, the house at Hyde Park, in 1882 to James Roosevelt and Sarah Delano Roosevelt. After Sarah gave birth, she was advised not to have any more children. Thus, Franklin was an only child to parents who were 26 years apart. Sarah was James Roosevelt's second wife. He had an older son by his first wife, Rebecca Howland. FDR's half-brother was actually named James Roosevelt Roosevelt. James, the father, who died in 1900, left the bulk of his estate to Sarah, with the remainder split between the two brothers. Rosie, as the brother was called, died in 1927, leaving FDR as the remaining child of James. Many biographical accounts have Sarah depicted as an interfering mama. Some records tried to be fair, saying she was merely devoted. At Springwood, Franklin's boyhood room is next to his mother's old room, with a connecting door. When FDR's father, James, died in 1900, Franklin was at Harvard University at the time. Sarah actually moved to Boston to be near her son. Around 1901, Franklin proposed to a Boston heiress who turned him down. In 1902, after running into each other on a train ride, Franklin and Eleanor began corresponding secretly, then seeing each other seriously. They had met previously when they were younger. They became engaged in 1903, but Sarah, FDR's mother, objected, insisting on a delay for a year before the engagement would be announced. She even took FDR on a cruise in 1904, but Franklin persisted, and she finally relented. As an orphan, Eleanor had grown up a bit awkward, insecure, and aware that she may not have been the greatest beauty, but she showed great insight at the age of 14, writing that people can be attracted to a woman if she is loyal and truthful. Educated in London, she was a good student and even somewhat popular, perhaps embodying her own words. However, she came back to the U.S. in 1902 to come out as a debutante, and because she did not know many people, it wasn't fun. That might not have mattered anymore, because by 1902, she had started seeing Franklin. Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Anna Eleanor Roosevelt were married in 1905. They were distant cousins. Franklin and Eleanor both had the same 5 times great-grandfather. Eleanor's parents had both died separately by the time she was almost 10 years old, leaving her an orphan. Therefore, Eleanor's uncle, President Teddy Roosevelt, gave her away. Mama Sarah stayed in the picture the entire time. The newlyweds spent a week at Hyde Park before getting an apartment in New York City and then going on a 3-month tour of Europe. But when they returned, they moved into a house in New York bought by Sarah. She had a house there too, and they broke through the walls with connecting doors, managing both households and leaving Eleanor out of the process. A year later, the first child was born. Sarah decided that Eleanor was simply the way the kids were born, allegedly saying that she was the actual mother, more so than Eleanor. Eleanor reportedly had a small breakdown at some point, telling Franklin that it was too difficult to be in a house where she had no say at all. Apparently, not much changed over the years. It's not said directly, but all of this interfering could be the reason why Eleanor did not think of herself as a natural mother, which is surprising considering her image as a caring activist later on in life. She also allegedly considered sex merely a necessary act to have children. Despite this attitude, the Roosevelts had 6 children, 5 of whom reached adulthood. The last child was born in 1916. By 1915, everyone was living at Springwood in Hyde Park. Franklin and Sarah renovated the house to accommodate the growing family. By this time, Sarah had moved into one of the larger front corner bedrooms with a view of the front of the estate. Franklin and Eleanor apparently had the large back corner bedroom with a magnificent view of the back of the estate, including the Hudson River. By this time, Franklin was a successful politician. He served as New York State Senator from 1910 to 1913. Then he was appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy by President Wilson. During this era, 1918, Eleanor found some letters implicating Franklin in an affair with her own secretary, Lucy Mercer. There had been more than one affair, but apparently FDR was bowled over and even considered leaving Eleanor for the love of Lucy, who had been hired in 1914. The affair began shortly after. There was also evidence he was advised not to do this because of his career. Ironically, one of these people was the one who originally objected to the marriage and was now objecting to a possible divorce: his mother. FDR ran on a 1920 ticket as vice president with James Cox against Warren Harding. They lost, of course, and FDR went back to New York and planning his next political move. Eleanor was on the campaign trail during that time, but now the affairs had taken their toll. They stayed married but started living separate lives. 1921, another life-altering event took place. Although Franklin had survived bouts of typhoid fever in 1912 and the 1918 flu pandemic, he suffered the loss of his legs for life when he was diagnosed with polio. Eleanor permanently moved out of their bedroom, moving into the small bedroom between Mama Sarah and FDR. Eleanor proved to be a good companion, though. She is credited with nursing FDR, possibly helping to save his life. She continued to battle with mother-in-law Sarah, but this time Eleanor won, helping to persuade FDR to stay in politics. By 1927, the situation got so tense, and since FDR and Eleanor were practically living apart anyway, Eleanor decided it was time to further establish her life. With the marital separation looking like it's going to be permanent, Eleanor and two of her friends established Val Kill on estate land that FDR offered 2 miles away. They had a lifetime lease. FDR encouraged her idea of creating a source of income for local craftsmen, and Val Kill originally included a furniture-making factory in the main cottage. By 1936, the main house was redone as the factory had closed, and the couple used the property to entertain. Living on the property in another building, Stone Cottage, were her two friends, Marion Dickerman and Nancy Cook, rumored to be a couple. Eleanor spent a lot of time at Stone Cottage and had a room there when the factory was open. Some information has it that she rarely spent the night there, and others say she stayed there if FDR and the kids were away from Hyde Park. Rumors hold that Eleanor wasn't totally innocent. As she and FDR led separate private lives, she had close friendships with like-minded women of the day, fighting for causes such as women's rights and civil rights. Some historians have her alternately linked romantically with men and women, corresponding with some of them. Eleanor did more than keep her husband physically alive while he was ill. She also kept his political career alive, standing in for him for speaking engagements. This period probably effectively launched her further into the spotlight as a political figure in her own right. Eleanor did not really want to be First Lady, but she had no choice, and she set the standards for active wives of presidents thereafter. She thought she would have to stop stumping for her own causes because her 20th century predecessors did just that when they moved into the White House. But because of the understanding that the Roosevelts had of their marriage, FDR actually supported her in redefining the role of First Lady. She had speaking engagements, press conferences, magazine and newspaper columns, and a radio program. She traveled all over. Many times, FDR did not know whether she was in residence in D.C. or not, nor did he visit her in her New York apartment until 1944. In turn, she could hardly reach him at the White House, sometimes having to go through his secretary. Legend has it that Eleanor never forgave him for that affair. FDR and Lucy supposedly resumed their affair in 1941, but some accounts say that their oldest daughter knew it never really stopped. And it was Lucy who was with FDR when he collapsed and died in Warm Springs, Georgia. Since FDR had left Springwood and the Hyde Park estate to the National Park Service, the Roosevelt family relinquished their right to continue living there for life, sooner rather than later. and Hyde Park, in effect, became the first presidential library, setting the standard for presidents to come. In fact, the library was built during FDR's lifetime. He moved his study from the house to the library during his term in office. Val Kill remained with Eleanor for her lifetime, but she lived in New York as well, dying there in 1962. It can probably be said that if the Roosevelts had had a closer marriage, it is possible things might have turned out differently. However, the aspects of their relationship probably or possibly created a circumstance that led to Eleanor becoming one of the most influential first ladies in the United States, setting the bar and standard for succeeding wives. Since it has also been said that FDR encouraged Eleanor to be active, to pursue her causes, he contributed to her activism in a way, a modern husband supporting a woman outside of the house. Perhaps they were friends and understood one another. At any rate, they are together still, despite an interfering mama and several affairs, because they are buried together at Hyde Park, and both of their houses are now historic sites. I'm the NYC Traveler, and we have been fascinated by FDR and Eleanor.